Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rich Habits Podcast, a top 5 business podcast on Spotify. My name is Austin Hankwitz, and I'm joined by my co-host Robert Croak. Robert is a seasoned entrepreneur in his 50s with lifetime revenues of over $300 million, and I'm an entrepreneur in my late 20s with a background in finance and economics. Since quitting my full-time job in corporate finance a few years ago, I've built a 7-figure media business and actively advise some of the most well-known fintech companies around the world. As the show name might suggest, every episode we talk about rich habits as they relate to business, finance, and mindset. However, we try and bring you 2 unique perspectives. One from an industry veteran, which is Robert, and the other myself, someone who's still in the process of building wealth and figuring it all out. Robert, the title of this episode gets me really excited, but I want to hear from you first. What are we going to be talking about in today's episode?
Yes, I'm super excited. In this episode of the Rich Habits Podcast, we're going to be reflecting upon our biggest wins of 2024, and there have been a lot of them. These wins will include financial wins, business wins, and even personal wins. We built this podcast to be as transparent as possible to our audience, and there's nothing more transparent than sitting down and reflecting upon what went well for us and maybe not so well in 2024, so this is going to be a fun one.
I'm definitely excited to share a funny loss or two in this episode, but I'm more excited to talk about the biggest wins, right, from 2024, because I think they're replicable wins. I think they've got some urgency to them, and I think that they can really inspire our listeners as we now flip the calendar into 2025. So this is going to be a really cool episode, and we picked 3 of our favorite wins from inside of the Rich Habits Network. There's about 500 people in there right now, which, by the way, if you've not yet joined the Rich Habits Network, there's going to be a link in the show notes below, and we're actually going to be spotlighting a few of our favorite wins that we saw inside of the network, so stay tuned for those as well. But Robert, kick us off with one of your wins from 2024.
Yeah, I would say probably one of my wins that I'm most excited about, and it goes back to 2022, and that is, let's just call it the AI win. Because I remember back in 2022, I was sharing all of these stocks that people really weren't recognizing, like Palantir and NVIDIA and SoundHound, and talking about how AI was going to be this big next sector that everyone should be keeping an eye on. And this was back in like Q3 of 2022. So I would say that would be my number one win with this AI sector, not just in stocks, but in crypto as well, because that entire sector has just been so huge now for a couple years and still growing. So yeah, it's been an exciting time for me with some of these call outs and some of my favorite stocks in the AI category. And if you look at NVIDIA for 2024 so far is up 196%. Palantir, which has been ripping, is up 210% so far this year. And then SoundHound is another one that no one was really talking about a year or two ago, and that is up 230% so far this year. So I would say that is my biggest win financially so far this year. What is yours?
Well, I guess before we jump into that, I'm curious, right? Because I want to really reflect on, let's call it this Q3, Q4 of 2022. You just found out about ChatGPT because it came out, I think, Thanksgiving of 22, right? So like we just became this sort of AI aware species of people. What was it about AI that made you feel so confident about making such a big bet on this sort of technology, not just even from the technology perspective, but even back thinking about what NVIDIA does from the hardware perspective, right? And then I guess even now Palantir from the software perspective and, predictive analytics, especially with military use.
Yeah, I would say for me, and you've heard more than anyone me say that you don't have to be first to an investment or an investment sector. You just have to be ahead of the masses. And I was just seeing so much hype around the future of AI, robotics, Web3, gaming, the metaverse. And it was just clear to me that I needed to get ahead of this sector and really bet heavy on it, even when others on my team thought I was too early and that I was probably taking too much unnecessary risk. And it's the same thing like what we're doing right now in Q3 and Q4 of 2024, 2 years later, where we're forward thinking, talking about where are the best places to be in nuclear energy with all of this, smaller nuclear reactor talks happening to build out our infrastructure of energy in the United States, because as we're all seeing with the election of Trump, that we believe we're going to see this golden age in manufacturing again. And with that is going to take a lot of addition to the power grid. So that means nuclear. That means solar and all of that. So between that and humanoid robotics, I believe you and I are in this same position again, where we're just ahead of the curve of guiding our audience so they know where to go to get ahead of the money in these up and coming sectors. So that's how I look at it, is just trying to be ahead of the curve.
I think it makes a ton of sense. Do you now, as we reflect upon some of these biggest wins of 2024 with NVIDIA and AI as a whole being one of your biggest wins, is there a moment in time now where you're saying, okay, it's time to take some money off the table? How do you approach taking profits and realizing this win as a true financial gain?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you and I have been talking about this a lot as we get further into this bull run, not only with stocks, but now crypto. Everyone's thesis is going to be different. For me, I try to look at it that when I get up 50% in a position, I usually take 25% off, wait till I get up to 50% again, take 25% off, and just keep repeating that process. It's a little different for me with NVIDIA, Palantir, SoundHound, Micron, MU, just because I think there's so much growth still that even though people are saying it's time to take some off the top, Palantir's CEO sold a little off. Jensen from NVIDIA sold a little bit of NVIDIA off. I don't think that matters because they're just doing smart, risk management by selling some of their stock off. So for me, I'm not ready to sell anything in the AI sector, even though I do believe we could see some volatility, because I believe the growth is so big in that sector and that I'm already in the best of breed. So I don't think it's necessary for me to take any more off the top. But for the up and coming investor that's just really getting started and really starting to just make a lot of money in this, I think it behooves them to take profits. And that's what I would do if I were them.
And when you say taking 25%, you're talking about selling 25% of the total investment's value, right? So let's say you invested $10,000. It's now worth $15,000 because it went up that 50%. You're saying to take 25% of the $15,000 off the table.
Of the total position, yep. And I generally do that in longer term plays, and you can adjust that. The audience can totally adjust that. They could make it that when they get to 25% total return, they take 10% off. I just like to get to a point in these longer positions where I'm risk off somewhat. And then that way I'm playing with more of the house's money. And then that way I can let it go longer through these dips and these cycles because I know the upside potential is so strong.
Got it. Very cool. Yeah, I just did some quick math, and assuming you do that and it goes up, call it 2 of these 50% gains, you actually would have taken profits now against 75% of your original investment. So you would have gotten back $7,500 of that $10,000 you would have originally invested.
That's the exact math of what I feel comfortable doing. And like I said, everyone can make theirs whatever they feel comfortable with, because everyone should have their own, risk tolerance and their own thesis for what they want to do for taking profits. All right, Austin. So let's talk about your top win for 2023. Regardless of category, let's hear it.
If it was like financial wins, right there with you. AI, Bitcoin, Williams-Sonoma actually was a great stock for me this year. I wanted to reflect more about this business win, this personal win that we had, Robert, which was going to the White House to speak with the Biden administration and learn more about the student loan crisis, right? We got invited to the White House to learn more about the SAVE plan and how people who are suffering with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans and thousands of dollars a month in, minimum payments that they have to make while only making 40, 50, 60,000 a year, right? The math doesn't add up. And so it was really cool to learn more about the progress that was made during that administration about student loans. I'm someone who's a firm believer, and if you take out debt, you should pay it back, right? But to that point, the reason that inspired, I believe, the SAVE plan, which is what we learned about, was the teachers in America. On average, these teachers had to graduate with $75,000, $85,000 of student loan debt because they have to get a master's degree. And then they're making $45,000, $55,000 a year as a teacher in those first couple of years. And when you have a minimum minimum payment of $1,000 and you're only taking home $3,000, $3,500 a month after taxes, like that's really tough. And so it was just really cool to see that despite this being the reality for so many people, there are solutions out there. So I actually took this save plan solution, and my friend is a DTP, which is a doctorate in physical therapy. She makes, I think, $75,000 a year, but has like $180,000 of student loan debt. Her monthly payment was like well over $2,000. And so I was actually able to hook her up with this save plan, and she's now figuring out kind of balancing, how do I pay this off quicker? Should I invest? Let's get the budget right, all that fun stuff there. So, I think just a really big win, Robert, is like when we started this podcast, I never thought that we would, have the opportunity to get invited to the White House to learn more about things that administration did. And hopefully we get invited back again during the Trump administration to learn more about the stuff that they're doing, because I think it all comes back to this idea that the Rich Habits podcast is not just your, this old guy and this young guy talking about money. This is us sharing with you all in real time what we're doing with our money, how we are learning, what we're learning, the resources we lean on. And if we learn something new or have a question or want to figure something out more, we invite a guest on the show that knows that more than we do, so they can educate us as well. So it's just been really cool and rewarding to reflect upon that. I know that happened, I think it was in like March or April this year, Robert, but it was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the White House trip was amazing, once in a lifetime opportunity for us. Hopefully we do get invited back, but it really just speaks to the fact that I feel like, we're men of the people, where we're just out here beating the street, finding those nuggets, sharing those nuggets, teaching people, and really learning in real time of what are the best possible solutions for everyone's pain points financially on their way to building financial freedom. And I think we just do a really good job of it. And it really, really excites me that we get these opportunities to bring on some of the people from BlackRock and iShares and all these people from around the world and these beautiful companies to really share with our audience the best possible strategies to build their wealth. And it just makes it so rewarding, not just for our finances, but everyone that follows along. So I love it. And I'm glad you brought up the White House trip, because even my cousin Tim, he was like, I've been in finance for 45 years. I've never been invited to the White House. And I'm like, well, I'm going for us, baby. So that was really, really cool.
So what do you think your maybe a second win to reflect upon for 2024 was for you?
Yeah, I had it written down, the merger of our audiences for us creating the Rich Habits Network, because we started out with the podcast. We both had our individual communities. They were both growing really well. And just the merger, creating the Rich Habits Network, to me is incredibly rewarding, because then we're putting all of our teams, all of our power together. And I think what we built and what we're growing right now will be one of the most meaningful communities, not just on school, but on the internet, because people are getting two different age categories, two different experience levels, and two different skill sets put together to really break down all of these myths and these struggles in the finance world. And so I would say, overall, take money aside, the Rich Habits Network is the most rewarding thing for 2024 and beyond for me that I've ever built.
No, I'm right there with you, man. Nothing humbles me more than getting a direct message from someone inside of the Rich Habits Network, and they say, hey, Austin, I did the things you and Robert told me to do, and now I'm debt-free and I have my emergency fund. Or I just got my first $100,000 invested. I'm going to build wealth now in a meaningful way because I finally know what ETFs and index funds to buy, right? It's so much fun.
Before you go on to your next point, I want to read the audience, and when you touched on heartfelt and things that you see in DMs, I want to read a response from an audience member in the Rich Habits Network that came through my DMs a couple days ago, because this is what makes what we do so rewarding. And I won't say her name, but I'm just going to read it off. Thank you so much for replying. What you and Austin do are providing real life experience and changing a lot of it for us and our families. You have changed the direction of 4 generations of my family in the last year and a half since I've been following you. My mother, 82, myself, and my 4 daughters, and my grandchildren. I hope you feel the appreciation from your followers, and I just wanted to write this letter and let you know.
Dude, does that not just fire you the heck up? It just, oh my gosh, man.
We get so many of them when I do the one-on-one calls with people. It's just so rewarding, because they send me a form ahead of time with everything in it so I can study before the call. But then they get on the call and sometimes they'll be tearing up or they'll be crying or talking about how their life has changed since following along and being educated by us. And it's just so incredible. I spoke yesterday at one of our Rich Habit Network employees. They brought all their employees in for me to speak to them. And I told you this in private, but I think we should mention it here. Over 80% of her employees over the age of 30 do not have Roth IRAs or individual brokerage account yet because of they have student loan debt, analysis paralysis, or not knowing where to start. So that is why I love what we get to do every day, because it is so rewarding, not just for the people that are already up and running and have $100K or $1 million or $5 million, but the people that are out there that have that $75,000 a year job and just don't know where to start. So it's incredibly rewarding.
Robert, I'm going to say this now, and I hope you agree with me because it's coming out of our checkbooks. I think that if people listening right now have a big win they want to share that they achieved because of listening to the Rich Habits Podcast, to send us an email at richhabitspodcast@gmail.com, put in the subject line, big win, and we're going to pick our 3 favorite, most inspiring wins and give each person $250. So $750. We're going to throw it out there for you guys to claim. Each person with a really big win is going to get $250. I love it. I love hearing these wins, and I want to reward these people for doing the right thing, man.
Yeah, it's just so good for the long term. So let's go into your next one. What's your second favorite win of the year, financial or otherwise?
Well, I think we'll round off the wins here, Robert, with this idea of getting $100,000 invested into SPYI and the other NEOS funds that we talk about, right? Because at the end of the day, Austin, why are you doing this? Why do any of us do this? Why do any of us save money, find margin in our budgets, and invest it? Because we want to stop working. We want to stop trading time for money, right? I remember working every single day, commuting 2 ways, right? But to the office and home when I was working at a Medicis, and it was fun. I enjoyed it, but oh my gosh, I was like, this cannot be it for 40 years. This can't be my life for 40 years. I got to figure it out. I just know that there's countless people listening right now that are like, I don't want to do this for 40 years. I want to retire early. I want to figure out how I can't even retire in the first place, right? And so for me, I took that leap of faith of, okay, if I'm going to retire early, I got to start acting like it, which means I need to start investing as much as humanly possible into the stock market, right? Take my active income, invest it so it turns into passive income. So I take my active income, it hits my budget, I spend money on the normal things, I find that 20-25% margin in my budget every month because I'm really after that budget, and then I take that money and I invest it. Robert, I'm up right now, so I just want to let you know here, in my brokerage account has got $600,000 in it right now. I am up $209,000 over the last 2 years alone. Since the start of 2023, I'm up $200,000. And that wasn't money I had to work harder for. That wasn't money I had to be smart for. That was money that was invested into the index funds, ETFs, and a couple single stocks that we always talk about, that just consistency and discipline allowed me to realize, right? And so anyone listening right now, there's nothing special about investing. There really isn't. If there was, I wouldn't be able to do it, right? It's so simple to just open up an account on public.com and get started. Open up that Roth IRA for the first time and say, okay, I'm going to make a conscious effort now of putting a couple $100 a month or even a couple $1,000 a year into my Roth IRA so that it can grow throughout my life, allowing me to retire a millionaire, or if it's in public in a bridge account, retire early. I want to retire early. I want this money to grow for me over time, and hopefully in the next 5, 10, maybe 15 years, I'll be able to reflect on all this money management and pinching pennies and staying super disciplined and focused on investing and say, wow, I now have enough money to retire. And again, I want to make sure we're on the same page about this, Robert, because I think people confuse retirement with like uber wealth. Right? A lot of people think, oh, retired, you live on a yacht and you're on the private jets and you have an island. It's like, no, right? Retirement means your passive income can supplement your lifestyle today. So that $200,000 that I've made in my brokerage account over the last 2 years, that's about $100,000 a year. I guess I could live off $100,000 a year if I wanted to, right? So like that's how retirement works. Now, we've had some really, really good years in the markets. You should think about the 4% rule. The Trinity study, we did a whole episode about finding your freedom number. Go listen to it. But my biggest win, again, was getting so much invested in these passive income funds like SPYI and the other NEOS funds, because I'm on my road to an early retirement. I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to deploy more capital, allowing me to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Well, I definitely think we're going to have to change the opener for 2025 of the Rich Habits podcast, where you say, I'm just a guy in his late 20s trying to figure it out, because I will say, if there was ever a prototypical person that has figured out the balance between proper investment strategies and the amount saved monthly and budgeted monthly towards investing while still enjoying life and the fruits of his labor, you've definitely done an incredible job. And it really makes me excited for the youth of our society, because, like the last 2 days of me being here in the Great Barringtons and talking to all these 20-somethings and 30-somethings really made me realize that what we do is incredible, because so many people just need a little bit of a helping hand to figure out what to do with their money and how to make more money and how to invest it correctly. So I'm really excited for 2025, and this episode really makes me feel a little melancholy, because it's just so cool that we get to do this every week and have such a massive audience that agrees with us. So it's so fun.
I couldn't agree more. And again, we make this episode of the podcast because we want people to get inspired by it. We want people to feel like, okay, I also invested in AI, or, ooh, what can I figure out as the next thing for 25 and 26? Or, oh yeah, Austin talked about passive income. Like, I need to figure that out for myself. Or I have student loans. Like, how do I figure those out, right? Like, we want you to feel inspired when listening to this episode. Get inspired about reflecting upon your own wins. The end of the year is coming out. We're finally in December. Maybe it's time to sit down with a notepad and a cup of coffee and just write down some of the biggest wins that you're really proud of for 2024, and, what you can continue to do, what rich habits you can continue to implement in your daily life that will allow you to not have just wins in 2025, but some really, really big ones. So we hope this episode was a good one for you guys. I feel super inspired right now. Now, before we jump into a few of our favorite wins from inside of the Rich Habits Network, let's take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor, Masterworks. Here's something interesting, Robert. Bank of America just released a new report that over 80% of multimillionaire respondents, 43 years old and younger, invest in or are looking to invest in fine art as a portion of their portfolios.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it really makes sense to us, because we diversify with art ourselves. And we've been using Masterworks' art investing platform for diversification for about 5 years now. And I love it because we're always preaching diversification. And I think Masterworks is a great way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Robert and I both invest with Masterworks, and we even interviewed their founder and CEO, Scott Lynn, on the show. They've now hit over 950,000 users on the platform and $1 billion of capital raised. And that's because with Masterworks, you don't need to be an art expert or spend millions of dollars to get started.
Exactly. And the fact that Masterworks has successfully exited 23 paintings to date, with each returning a profit, doesn't hurt either. So listeners can learn more at masterworks.art/rich habits, which is also shown in the show notes of this episode.
As with any investment, past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. There are important Regulation A disclosures, and they can be found at masterworks.com/CD. So our first Rich Habits Network respondent is Paige M. She says, I discovered the podcast May of 2024. I started the first episode and I watched all of them as quickly as possible. Since then, I've 1, fired my financial advisor and I'm saving so much money now. 2, opened an IRA and maxed it out. Shout out to Austin for taking a private call with me and helping me decide what percent to put where and just give me so much confidence. 3, opened a bridge account with public.com. 4, adjusted my 401k percentage, allowing me to invest up to the match, max out the Roth, and then also get my bridge account rocking. 5, changed the fund my 401k was invested into now to actually track the S&P 500. 6, started investing my HSA money because beforehand it was just sitting there in cash. 7, convinced my boyfriend to get an IRA and he dollar cost averages every single week. And finally, number 8, I've also told my sister about the podcast and she's been putting more into her kids' accounts and their 529s and allowing them to build generational wealth. Robert, Are you kidding me, dude? Does this not just fire you up? Like, it's so cool to see, like, you know, it's kind of hard, right? Because, like, we talk about so many different subjects across all of the 92 now episodes we published. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to think, like, oh my gosh, like, I have to find the gems in every single one. Paige obviously did it, and she just went through and she's accomplished so much. My favorite thing is she's got the 401k now invested in the S&P 500. I bet it was in a target date fund or some international stocks beforehand. So she is setting herself up for success. Paige, we cannot be more excited for you.
Yeah, I love it because Paige is a great example of someone that takes notes and takes action. Because I think there's a lot of issues in modern society where people are so overstimulated with information, but they don't do anything with it. I see it all the time where people have all this education, but they don't take action. So Paige, kudos to you. I love when I hear from people in the Rich Habits Network that take action, because at the end of the day, we are here putting out, the blueprint. We're giving you all the plays from the rich, the wealthy, how to do it, where to go, all of the above. But if you don't take action, we can't help you. So I love seeing Paige's response here. Makes me so happy.
Let's go, dude. So our next Rich Habits Network participant is Connor L. Connor says, I've done a few things since listening to the Rich Habits podcast, starting with number 1, starting 2 businesses. I started 2 new businesses with no prior knowledge of how to run them. Sometimes the best way to start is just dive in and figure things out as you go, iterate and improve along the way. Now, of course, I have made some mistakes, but I've also figured a lot of things out on my own. Our startup web development firm is about to lock in $30,000 worth of contracts in the next couple of weeks, and we're really stoked about the progress. All of this was inspired by what you and Robert have shared on the podcast. The second thing I did was starting investing into ETFs. This year, I shifted my focus to managing my own funds and investing into the ETFs you all talk about, thanks to the insights from the Rich Habits podcast and the network. Before, I didn't realize how simple and effective ETFs can be for long-term growth. I was always falling for the meme stocks and the penny stocks. Now I've gained the knowledge and confidence to invest on my own, and has been my biggest financial win this year by far. And then number 3, this year, I also began contributing to my Roth IRA thanks to the Rich Habits podcast. I used to focus on the immediate tax benefits of a traditional IRA, but now I'm thinking ahead about how taxes will be in 30 years from now and how they could be much higher than today. So I'm really excited about my Roth IRA progress. Robert, what do you think about this one?
I love it. And, it's just one of those things where Connor is so active in the Rich Habits Network. We really appreciate that. We love the fact, and that's why we called it a network, that everyone is utilizing it and bouncing ideas off of each other, taking our thoughts and our big ideas and really melding them into their daily lives. And it's so important. And even today, I was really mad because I met with someone today that wanted some help, and I just looked through their stuff, and they had their account, which was their 401k, left over from their old work, and they had no exposure to the S&P 500 in it. And it really, really bummed me out. So I love seeing people that follow along in our community, really crushing it and just figuring it out of what works best for them, their risk tolerance, and their current financial situation. So congrats, Connor, and we are so lucky to have you in the community.
Right there with you, Robert. Shout out to Connor. He's an awesome asset to the community. Now, before we jump into our final Rich Habits Network participant response from our Really OP, let's take a moment to hear from what NEOS Investments has to say. This episode of the Rich Habits podcast is brought to you by NEOS Investments. They just launched a new addition to their high income ETF that provides exposure to the 2,000 small cap stocks that make up the Russell 2000 index, while aiming to provide tax efficient monthly income to their investors. Their ETFs may be especially interesting for folks looking to generate passive income inside of their investment portfolios.
And as you've probably heard us mention recently, small cap stocks have historically performed when rate cuts begin after a period of high interest rates. So if you're looking to add passive income focused ETFs to your portfolio, especially as the Federal Reserve may continue cutting interest rates in the coming months, consider learning more about NEOS ETFs at neosfunds.com. And as with all investments, investors should carefully consider their investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of NEOS exchange-traded funds before investing. To obtain a prospectus containing this and other important information, please visit neosfunds.com. Please read the prospectus carefully before you invest.
An investment in NEOS ETFs involves risk, including possible loss of principal. The equity securities purchased by the funds may involve large price swings and potential for loss. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All right, let's see what Aurelio P has to say as it relates to his biggest wins from the Rich Habits podcast. Since listening to the podcast, I've 1, maxed out my Roth IRA, 2, started my emergency fund in the public high yield cash account, 3, started investing $2,000 a month into my bridge account and hoping to live off my investments using the Trinity study and the 4% rule. I was able to figure out what that was through the podcast by listening to the episode of Calculating the Freedom Number. And then 4, my wife and I put our son on our credit cards when he was 15 years old because of what Robert said. He's now 18 and has a 780 credit score. Let's go, dude. Oh my gosh. That's really, really cool.
I love it. And again, it just really speaks volumes that people are taking action based on what they learned from us, because there is so much incredible bad information out there and so much clickbaity stuff on the internet. So I love the fact that we can break down these hard investment topics, make it bite-sized and actionable, and people are really going for it, because the number one thing is the more people we can get to think like an investor and not like a consumer and take action, the better off they're going to be. And the coolest part about what we're doing here with the Rich Habits podcast and the network is thinking ahead. What is this going to look like in 5 years when we've been at it that long and thousands and tens of thousands of people's lives have been changed financially and educationally relative to their businesses and mindset? That's when this gets really, really fun, because we're just getting going.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know, for example, that there's tons of people that are really invested in some other podcasts, and these podcasts are doing like cruises and summits and all these cool things. Like, man, I can't wait to do something like that with you, Robert. It's going to be a lot of fun. Everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with us on this episode of the Rich Habits podcast and just kind of having a chat, right? Having a conversation about us reflecting on what really got us fired up in 2024, what continues to get us excited in 2025, and just hearing about all the absolutely mind-boggling, insane wins that people, not just that are inside the Rich Habits Network, but people that are also listening to the podcast in general, wherever you are around the world, and the things that you all are accomplishing because of the show. It is the most humbling thing I've ever done in my life. It is so cool to know that we are positively impacting the financial journey of so many people, and I can't wait to see, Robert, what we end up doing over the next, to your point, 5 years plus.
Yeah, and it's just so exciting because you think about right now with what's happening in cryptocurrency. We have been preaching to the mountaintops for 18 months now collectively, and much longer individually, to dollar cost average. And for all the people that have been doing that while the crypto markets were sideways for months and months and no activity, it really just shows that if you put in the work, it really does pay off if you know what you're doing and where to go. And so it's really great getting all of these DMs and texts and messages every day right now, because people are making so much money because of the work they've been doing for the last year or two, setting the groundwork by dollar cost averaging into all of these things we talk about. So these are exciting times, and it's going to be a heck of a Christmas for a lot of people out there. So I'm super excited and so appreciative of all of you that stop by each and every week. You give us the 5-star review, you share the podcast with a friend, and all of you that joined the Rich Habits Network and put your faith in us to provide you incredible information each and every week to help you grow and really just solidify your plan for your financial future.
And Robert, here's an idea. On Spotify, you can actually leave a comment on a podcast episode. So if you're listening to this episode on Spotify, scroll down and leave us a comment of your biggest win so we can publish it and show everyone else what the awesome wins are that everyone that listened to the podcast do. So leave us a comment on Spotify. And with that being said, thanks so much and have a great start to your week.